we'll get started. I'm Sarah Sterling. I'm a First Ward Supervisor in Hudson here. Been here 17 years. Carol Ostering to my left, Ellen Thurston, David Voorhees, Mara Esterboo, and Joe Connolly. We started, when I started, there was a beautification committee. This was years ago. Ruth Tamaroff and most of people have moved on. Bob Soto, Fran and Vinnie DeGrazia. And we decided on a project which was whiskey barrels as planters on the streets here. And I don't know if any of you, and I think there's still some whiskey barrels left. And the idea was to kind of unify Warren Street up and down, and we got donations of plants, and I think Sam Pratt thought we were tacky, and a few other people, but it was a start. It was a start, and then, let's see what we did. Then over the years, it just kind of morphed into various organizations, and we did some planting around St. Winifred's statue up here. Then there was a problem getting water to it. So occasionally, things would die. We'd run out of water, we'd run out of money, and then we start up again, and we planted 2 trees up in Thurston Park, the small park up here. 2 of the trees had died. They were the flowering pears. So you'll see 2 of them aren't quite as big as the others, but they'll get there. And then we got into Mrs. Greenthumb's Day, open garden days, which we've had for a couple of years. And the Opera House had some open gardens before that. And over the years, we've gotten donations. A lot of it isn't. We found selling tickets is difficult, so we just did donations at the gardens. And then we had enough money to pay for the architect for the ramp for the Promenade Hill. And now we have about $4,000 in the kitty from various things. And it just seems time. We have a critical mass here, obviously, of all you people, to morph into something bigger and have a real Parks Conservancy, because the DPW just can't. They don't have the skills or the money, and conservancies just seem to work better. So we're gathered here and for ideas, and I'll turn it over to Carol.
Well, thank you. Sarah touched upon a few things that I was going to say, but we are in this position at the present time. We have some money. We have this group that we're being encouraged by HBC, who is holding our money, to become a 501c3, and we got together and talked about what we wanted to do. We didn't necessarily want to make our Mrs. Greenthumb's hedge fund, which is what we've been calling ourselves, because our initial reason for doing the garden tours, or for asking money at the garden tour, was to replace the boxwood hedge in the little pocket park across the street from the Opera House, which was in terrible shape. It turned out that the Park Foundation was going to replace the plantings anyway, so we have the Mrs. Greenthumb's hedge fund. We didn't quite know what to do with it. And when it seemed that there were people hell-bent to put up a ramp in the very historic park behind us, we decided, and we saw some of the plans for that ramp, we decided to step in, use our money, pay for an architect who has designed the ramp that is going to be built, which is sensitive to the park, it doesn't interfere with it, and all of that. So we kind of, we like that ability to kind of come in and fix something. And so we, sat around and talked, and the idea we came to the agreement that what we really wanted to do was create something, a group that would ultimately be to the Parks of Hudson what the Central Park Conservancy is to Central Park. And so we've been calling ourselves the Hudson Parks Conservancy. Someone raised the question of whether or not we could really use the term conservancy if we were not in fact legally a conservancy and did not have that understanding, that contract with the city of Hudson. Apparently, Sarah had a conversation with, not apparently, but Sarah had a conversation with Peter Payden today from the Land Conservancy, who is a lawyer, in addition to being the executive director there, who said, you can absolutely use that term, there are no legal restrictions. So, you know, I'm thrilled this aspirational name can actually be a name that we use right now. So what we're trying to do tonight is a few things. We've talked about it, and we've decided that in order to go forward, we probably need a formation team, which is a group of people who are willing to work on getting the 501c3 and exploring some options for how we should structure this organization. Is it a membership organization? Is it simply volunteers? Do we have a board of directors? You know, all of those kinds of issues. We also would like a group to form to be a historic parks study team. Now, typically when, you know, there's a historic park or a historic building, you have a, you know, a study of its entire history. And we have much of that information. And rather than paying a consultant, we thought we would get a team together and put all of that information together so we have it. Then we also need a group who is willing to put together the 2018 Mrs. Green Thumbs Day garden tour. So those are three options for you to get involved going forward. You're not required to be part of any of them, but if you want to, if you've signed up, before you leave, indicate whether your greatest immediate interest is the formation team, the historic park study team, or the Mrs. Green Thumbs Day team. So now the real business at hand is to get some ideas from you about what you want to do. I think I would like us to come up with a project that is within our reach, that is doable, that is, you know, will show our credibility, that will, you know, sort of make a basis for, you know, what we want to do in the future. So we're going to listen to any and all ideas, and at some point we'll sort through them all and come to consensus on a few of them. So you don't have to wait for 45 minutes to be able to speak if you do it now. And Ellen's going to be the moderator of this.
And we thought somebody should write all these wonderful ideas you're going to come up with down on paper. But thanks to Dan Udell and Mary Udell, who show up at most meetings, they showed up here, and we're really happy that they did, because all of you are going to be movie stars now. So, first of all, thank you so much for coming. It's great to have standing room only, and I see a lot of people I know, but I also see a lot of people I haven't met. So, and we need to meet each other as well. So when you do speak, if you could give your name, and I always think you can be heard better if you stand up. If you wish to stand up, that would be a great thing. And tell us your name and where you live in the city, if indeed you do. So, I saw a hand. Ken.
My name is Keith Kanaga. I live on Allen Street, between 2nd and 3rd. I'd like to propose the 7th Street Park for consideration, and I go up there all the time. It's such a wonderful little park that could be so much greater than it is. I don't have the imagination to tell you what fits the project or what that thing would be, but even the plantings there are just really well past their date.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Not an idea, just a question. Do we have a current list of parks?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do you have a list of the parks in
Well, we
Hudson?
don't have one that we can distribute to you, but we can certainly put one together.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, we'll put it on the Facebook page. Is
Okay.
everybody following that?
Sure. Okay, there were hands back here. Yes.
I'm interested in Promenade Hill.
Could you just say your name?
Oh, Peg Patterson, Dish, and I live on Warren Street and First.
A little louder, please.
Warren Street and First, and my name is Peg Patterson.
Okay.
which is a wonderful store.
And I run a shop right there in my home. I'm interested in this little park at St. Louis. It seems like a manageable project. It's not that big. I mean, I'm sure that it's got lots of problems that will be discovered, but it seems like it would be a good smaller project.
Can we have this be a back and forth conversation? There actually is a grant now. I mean, everybody always talks about Promenade Hill, and what is most upsetting to most people is this hard surface, tarmac kind of approach to it. So the city through HDC has submitted a grant, I think, and I don't know how much it's for, but to, restore the entrance to the park. So, I mean, that would be a good, that's kind of what everybody senses is the worst thing about the park, but there's, the walkways and the benches and
the privets, the poor privets.
And those terrible hedges that are, so, and that's, we're very focused on hedges because the way DPW, like prunes a hedge or a bush that's kind of straight up the sides and straight across the top, and you don't even recognize what the bushes are anymore. So, yeah, that's a very good suggestion.
Hi, Kitty Mackey from Warren Street, 108 Warren. I just, the little clump that isn't really a park, as you enter town, where everything converges, 9, State, and Columbia, right there before the park.
That's Rogers Park.
Rogers Park. That is really an eyesore, I think, the last time I saw it. And since it's the entrance to our city, I think that would, if we can do anything about that, that would really be worthwhile. Because I think we have a horse trough there. Is it still there?
That's the one with the eternal ash trees,
Yes.
I like to call it.
Which is great. The horse trough, I mean, it's wonderful, but it just needs something new.
Well, I don't think the horse trough is wonderful. I think it's really quite dreadful.
Oh, we're gonna have, I can see a good conversation at that.
Yes, I have one in my backyard, so
And
I have a preference for
it's
that.
not really a horse trough. It's a torch which gets lighted from time to time when the Olympics are going on. Because
Yes,
Well,
anyway,
If some of you out in the hall would like to come in, you could sit on the tables over here.
also, I
Some
just
hall
did
people
have one question.
stand on the
I
hall
thought
over
it
here.
might be helpful if you people also gave us feedback on what you're thinking, what your focus on projects would be.
I think it should be something that will be achievable.
Yeah.
That's my main thought about it. There's someone back here first.
Oh, hello, I'm Julie Metz, and I live on Warren Street on the 200 block. And just to go back to the 7th Street Park, which although it's not at the entry point of town, it is sort of an important square. It's sort of our only square, I guess you'd call it. And I've often thought when I'm there that it really could become sort of the Bryant Park of Hudson, where whenever I look at it, I see seating and some little sandwich concession, and it doesn't have to be fancy, but there's something about Bryant Park that really works. It really draws people, and I think that whole square would be very enlivened and beautified by doing some work on that park.
I would just suggest that, Catherine Kanega, I live on Allen Street. I would just suggest that whatever project we choose, that we figure out a way to engage the community in that project. So whether or not it's a planting day or a, I don't know, but just a way to get people involved in that, a cleanup day. I always enjoyed that with the Central Park Conservancy, and I think that it's a way to get the word out about it, get people frankly to contribute either from a volunteer perspective if they can't give money or both.
That reminds me, we planted bulbs one year up around the fountain that's in prison. And but the dirt is so terrible there, I think when the squirrels dug up the bulbs or something. So for 1 year it was great, and then it didn't last any longer. But that was a community event.
Okay, here, and then there, and then there, and then there.
My name is George Cronard. I'm at 236 State Street, off all your rules. I have a question about, has anyone struck up a relationship with, I guess you call it DPW, Department of Public Works? Has anyone reached out to them to say, hey, can we get you guys to stay off the, off the guardrails, so to speak? I mean, is there...
They would love help, but we haven't been able to find, and sometimes a landscape person will volunteer to work with them, but it's never gotten to that further step. They would accept help, and we could possibly send somebody to the college to take a horticulture class.
Yeah, that's what we've talked about among ourselves often, funding, getting some training for at least one person on the DPW crew to, know how to prune trees and shrubs and whatever.
I mean, they would, if this group could assist DPW, they would probably start to see cost savings just in their city budget themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Phil McCarthy, 225 Union Street, between 2nd and 3rd. With all these parks, I think it would be useful if a subgroup or a committee from this group did a census of who's using these parks, how many people, what they're using them for, and then have a discussion around what could they be used for, and what are the pros and cons of each park. The courthouse is surrounded by, the courthouse park is surrounded by beautiful buildings, beautiful churches, etc. This park has a beautiful vista. 7th Street has a lot of potential traffic, although it has, one side is a gas station and a derelict hotel. I mean, so if that could be studied in that way, and not making a big deal of it, but just, I think that could inform the next decision. And completely not relevant to what I just said, but Cornell University, which is my alma mater, has the best ag school in the country. And surely you could probably get an intern or two during the summer to work on this from Cornell. It's, so it's just an idea. And
I think
there's a lot of brain
the
power there.
idea of doing the inventory or the census of the parks is excellent. So with everyone's consent, to my 3 groups, I wish to add a 3rd. So if somebody wants to work on the census, please indicate on the sign-in sheet there.
Does anybody else want to come in? There's some wall space, if you want to stand in here, and some tables over there.
Okay, Kitty, and then I think there was a gentleman back here. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's the 4th group, we thought. We already have 3 groups.
Right. And okay. I'll just create a 4th group.
My turn? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom D'Onofrio. I'm a resident of the new 3rd Ward, which was the former 5th Ward on Aiken Avenue. I'm a 3rd generation resident of Hudson, New York. Okay? I want you to know my family came here in the late 1800s. And I would like to know what the status is of the plan for 7th Street Park that was proposed X amount of months or a year ago. What happened to that idea? Number 2 is there an inventory of the former fountain that once stood proudly at 7th Street Park? Okay. And I would like to tell you the reason why that park is the way it is today, and you have to remember a railroad train runs through it. Okay? The park is on both sides of the railroad. is because the city decided that it was dangerous to have high hedges there, which ran on both sides of the railroad tracks, due to the youth that used to hang out in the park, okay? All right, and the other thing about the DPW is those men are employed to do a job as fast as they can. They go there with trimmers, chop, chop, chop. Unless you have professional people doing it, you're going to have end results as you have today, no matter how much money you spend and how much you plant. That's my thought.
I know in Central Park in New York, they have volunteer pruners, but they're all volunteer and trained, so I think it can work.
Right,
that
but
way.
the question is, will the city allow volunteers to
that's-
take
yes.
jobs away from
That's
the people?
actually, well, it just frees them, it would free them to do other jobs that they have
Right.
to do, like
Right.
putting, marking the crosswalks.
Yes.
Or various other things, but that, that's an agreement that we have to make with the city somewhere down the road.
Right.
And I'm hopeful that we can. But to answer your first question about the status of the reimagined 7th
Yeah.
Street Park, it has been, thank God, abandoned.
Okay.
And the fountain, I visited Venus only a year or so ago. She is in a DPW garage
Right.
on North 2nd Street.
Right.
At the time, Wendell Davis and I had some people who were interested in restoring her.
Right.
And they were, we went to visit her, with Rob Perry. So she is restorable. We
Okay.
have, I'm sure you're well aware of, given the time you spend in the history room and at the Columbia County Historical Society, that fountain as it was is very well documented in
Right.
pictures. So it's entirely possible, if there's an agreement that, this is what we want to do, it's entirely possible to recreate the fountain, to restore Winifred, put everything back the way it was. But, that
This
is,
St. Winifred here?
no, I'm talking about Venus, I'm sorry. I don't know about Winifred.
Well,
There actually
real
never
quickly,
was-
Venus, Winifred was a fountain.
Well,
And there was that
there was
cement
a
around it was a
pool
water
around it,
pool.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Now it's a home for woodchucks.
it is, yes.
And Venus is in rehab, so I can see the campaign we can have, and bring Venus out of rehab.
Do you
Okay,
think it
Alan, you
would,
was-
may I just say something
Sure.
once more and then that'll be it? Do you think if we should search the idea of restoring the former Venus fountain, the question is going to be asked, what are you planning to do with the donation by is it the Kiwanis Club, with the existing fountain in 7th Street Park? It was donated by
It's the
some
Kiwanis
group
Club,
from Hudson.
but there is no Kiwanis Club anymore.
Right, that's true, but I'm saying, what,
It
you'd
is-
have to get an idea
It
maybe
is
what to
a
do with that
difficult
fountain. Can we
situation.
transfer it to another park or something else or somewhere in the city?
I don't see that it's a fountain at all. It's just some jets coming up
Yeah.
out of a pool.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I
Swap
think
places with Venus in the garage.
any changes are proposed, and anything proposed is going to have to be sensitive to what went before
Right.
and whether people like it or not. Carol hated that design. I thought it was a very modern giant park, didn't really fit here, but it was somebody coming with an idea for a grant, and then they proposed this park. Well, it was just shocking to everybody because it was so modern.
Mm.
So there wasn't enough time really spent to really find what would fit the city here. So anything that going forward is going to have to be sensitive and take everybody's ideas. Yeah, because you don't want to step on somebody's toes and gifts and all. That's why the history will be really valuable, is to know how things changed over the years.
Alan Newman.
Yeah, I'm Alan Newman, and I'm on the board of Historic Hudson. And I first of all, I just love this. And I guess my initial thought is, Carol says, let's do something small to begin with. I think it's important to do one thing really well. One. Two, there already is energy below 2nd Street in the city and enhancements coming. So it seems that Promenade Hill is a likely candidate. Also because we know this landscape ramp is coming. And we know that there's some proposal, I don't know what, for this entrance. But key enhancements to make sure that ramp is all that it can be is what this group could do to enhance. And look at the history of the park, look at the historic design. It is Hudson's first park, and so maybe it's the first project of this organization. But for instance, if the ramp needs enhanced landscaping, maybe there's a way that this group could have it designed, planted, and then pay and train people to maintain it as a way to start small with a project that everyone can say, this is what we have in mind. And maybe it's just the area around the ramp to start with, but it makes sense to me to do it below 2nd Street. And I'm not quite sure what enhancements that immediate area around the ramp need, but it probably needs enhancement by a group just like this. So.
Who's next?
Yes, Elsa.
Elsa Webersel. Just to say that the Conservation Advisory Committee is doing an inventory of parks, of everything around Hudson and in Hudson, including the parks. And at the moment, we are doing an inventory of the trees, street trees, which will be mapped, and the condition of them, and where we need replacements, and where the trees need help. So,
Is it a green space inventory? We're looking at all green spaces?
well, it's looking at all sorts of different things, including sewage, and the green space will be part of it.
I see.
So,
Good
you
to
know,
know.
perhaps there can be a connection there.
Yeah. Mr. D'Onofrio.
Thank you. You mentioned the ramp that's to initiate that as a possible first project because it's small and you want to be successful and show everyone you're successful, correct? Will that monies from the DRI, will any of that monies be available to do any of that?
I don't know.
Not really, I mean,
What's
based
that?
on,
Probably part of the project.
based on what was said last night, it's unlikely that any of that money. But there's, as I said, there's this other consolidated funding application that was done for the entrance here to Promenade Hill, and I can't remember what the figure is.
So
But
that's this area right up
that's
here?
this, yeah.
Okay.
But the money is now finally in place for the ramp itself.
Okay.
So, and I think that any money for like additional planting and one thing or another has been stripped out of that $180 budget. So what Alan suggested is, something that needs to be done, and it would be a first, it would be a good first step for us.
No, I was referring to the $10 million.
Yeah, I know what you're
Right.
referring to.
I'm
There's
sure-
no
I
part
mean,
of
would it
that
be
10
worthwhile to pursue
Well,
that?
There is,
Yeah.
I
We're
suppose,
going to be going to those meetings,
yeah.
so.
I mean, right now, they've identified 7 priority projects.
Okay.
And the only thing that could possibly be, applied to this is a vague sort of waterfront improvement. And so I'm not hoping for any of that 10 million for this.
Yeah, my name is Richard Wallace. I live in the 500 block of Warren Street. I think the Conservancy idea is a great idea. I think there's plenty of parks, all of the parks in Hudson are worthy. They have historic backgrounds and provenance that I think once you dig into the inventory, I find even more fascinating. I'd like to speak up for my favorite park though, which is the waterfront park. I think the DRI, notwithstanding in terms of what the contribution that conservancy like this might be able to provide is it's the part of Hudson that actually physically touches the river. It's a little messy because of that. It has a history because of that. But it also has, as I know and many people who go down there on a regular basis, it is like a magnet. It draws people, and it speaks of Hudson and to Hudson and of what Hudson is. And I think that for a conservancy of this type, given that everything that is behind that is going to go through some, you know, major development in the next couple of years, that envisioning what that park should be in the totality of that, I think would be a really worthwhile contribution of this organization.
It'll be very important for you and others to go to the DRI meetings, public meetings.
Next Thursday,
Yes.
6
They
o'clock.
say they want to hear from the community, so that's your chance. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Charles Sprawls. I live on McKinstry Place. I've been here about 13, 14 years now. I'm curious, what part of the city budget, is there a specific part of the budget for city park maintenance, and how much is it or how little is it?
Now, I'm not certain that the DPW budget is itemized in that way. I don't know. If you've ever looked at the city budget, it's pretty hard to sort of penetrate and figure out, you know, what goes to what, because I know there is a budget set aside for the cemetery, but I'm not certain if there's a budget set aside for the parks.
I mean, it seems like some projects have been prioritized, like Riverfront Park. You know, recent developments down there, the bandstand, the grass seems to be fairly well maintained, the new boat slip, the Dunn Warehouse, which I'm not sure if that's considered park or private property on the park.
Well, it's owned by the city of Hudson.
It is, okay.
But it's not, you know, it's still unclear whether, you know, what's going to happen there. If, you know, there have been plans in the past that all of that land on the east side of Water Street, which belongs to the city, there have been plans that show that all, you know, developed with buildings there. There are other people who would like to see the park expanded back, as you know, toward the railroad tracks. Alan made the suggestion in another meeting that the road be moved back toward the railroad tracks, so that there is like unbroken grass from the back there all the way to the park, and expanding the park in that manner and getting rid of the vehicular traffic that goes through there. So what's going to happen there is not really clear, but we certainly as a group could advocate for what we think should happen there.
It seems like one priority should be getting the city to look to this group as sort of a guiding force for this process. I mean,
Wouldn't that be
yeah, my grandson-
Build up our reputation here somehow.
Well, looking to people
But
who
yeah.
have the experience and
Yeah.
the skills
The name is
necessary
good
to make this
now.
happen. And also, I happen to bring 3 of my antique postcards with some pictures of various parks, which I'll be happy to pass around.
Oh, great, thanks.
You know, one thing that Promenade Park needs is a sign saying, hey, there's a park up here. And people tell me that they come in to, there was a woman from Chatham once told me that she comes in regularly to the train station, comes in here, drives down Front Street, and never knew, in all the time she's lived in Chatham, that there was a park there, or that there was a glorious view there. So a sign, I think, would be.
And everybody will know about it though.
Yeah,
It's such
right.
a great park.
Control. Peter.
I'm Peter Young. I have a gallery deal in American paintings in the 5th block of Warren Street. Been here 26 years. I can say a couple things. For better or worse, I'm on the DRI committee. I've already stocked up on Band-Aids and helmets. I'm expecting it to be a wild ride. The impression I had from last night's meeting is that the state is pushing us very hard to get a lot of stuff done in a short time frame, and I'm pretty concerned about that. But in any case, to the extent that I could be an advocate or a liaison between this group and the DRI, I'm very happy to do that. Should this group decide to shoot for a little grant, some slice of the DRI money, I think that would be appropriate, and I'm happy to be the conveyance to that committee. Perhaps you can get 50,000, 100,000, or whatever seems appropriate. But I don't think that's out of the question. And my thinking about this is based very much on a quote I heard from a wonderful woman. Her name was Clara Gould. She was the mayor of Beacon, New York, back in the 80s and 90s. And some years ago at the Opera House, we had a seminar on economic development in small communities. And she said the most perceptive thing I've ever heard. She said, if you want economic development in your town, make it a nice place to live. And I thought that was just spot on. Forget these corporate welfare scams and tax deals and sweetheart economic arrangements. Just make your waterfront attractive, your hospital, your schools, your roads, your parks, and people will want to be there. So in terms of economic development, that's my sort of credo. I love that thinking. So in any case, I'm happy to be the link to the committee if that's helpful.
Would you speak about the cemetery?
I will, yeah. I was going to ask whether, I assume our lovely cemetery is going to be a part of the mission, and that's a big one because that's a substantial piece of real estate. Some years ago there was talk of some kind of trail that would connect the area near the hospital over the hill to get you directly into the cemetery, into the old portion of the cemetery. And I don't remember the specifics, but maybe that could be revived. But that cemetery certainly is probably our best park. It's certainly our largest park at the moment. And I actually have a Facebook page up called the Headstone Society, and the idea is to get people to think of the park as a living place, not just a repository for the deceased. So I wanted to say a little bit about Sanford Robinson Gifford. I don't know how many of you are aware of his work, but he was one of the great Hudson River painters. Born 1823, died 1880. His father ran an iron foundry here in town. And I found his grave up in our local cemetery some years ago, and there's a website about it called Gifford's Grave. So in any case, Gifford enjoyed a major exhibition at the Met a few years ago. This is the catalog for it, and you're all welcome to look. He's on a par with Church and Cole. If anybody has one kicking around in the basement, you know where to find me. I mean, a major Gifford could be a couple $1 million these days. They're really spectacular paintings. He's the great luminist. So, in any case, for some years I've been entertaining the notion that maybe the 7th Street Park could be christened Gifford Square. The family home was at 6th and Columbia, where we now have a farmer's market. Unfortunately, a beautiful Italianate mansion was reduced to an asphalt parking lot. And then the foundry was very close by as well. So our 7th Street Park sits directly between the Gifford Foundry and the Gifford home. And the 7th Street Park is actually not its official name. I think Carol has informed me that the official name is the Public Square. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So 7th Street Park is a name that doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't have a particular attachment to anything significant about Hudson. It's just sort of a name by default. And since it is a square, as Julie mentioned, I really like the idea of personalizing it with an important artist who's a really significant Hudson River School painter. I think it just gives it a lot more flavor, a lot more local identity, and it's a classier name than the 7th Street Park. So I've been waiting for the politically opportune moment in Hudson, that sometimes can be a long wait, to propose this. I imagine it would require an act of the City Council or something. I haven't explored the mechanics and the politics, but I would hope that this group would be receptive and supportive of that.
Let me just explain how Thurston Park got its name.
He's not going first.
No, it was named for John Thurston, who was one of the proprietors. But
I think I'm related.
It got its name only because people started using it. The Historic Hudson and the Hudson Opera House had a garden tour in the city of Hudson in 1997, and that little park had just been completed. And we wanted to have someone, we wanted that park on the tour. And actually Bobby Burns was in the park reading excerpts from The Secret Garden And that's why we wanted people to come there, to hear him read. And we needed to give it a name. So I looked at the proprietor's map, realized that that parcel had originally belonged to John B. Thurston. And I just referred to it as Thurston Park, and we just kept calling it Thurston Park. And then the Register Star started calling it Thurston Park, and now it's Thurston Park.
Yeah, well, maybe by default is the quickest and best route, but in any case, I think Gifford Square is much more locally meaningful, attractive, and just generally a better choice than the 7th Street Park. So in any case, once we get to the point where I hope to propose this more formally, I'd love the support of those of you who think it's a good idea.
Carol,
Yes.
aren't those houses across from
Yes.
his kids, built for his
Those
kids?
houses
So
were all
those are all
built for
still
his sons,
standing?
yes.
Right,
By the way,
that's pretty nice.
one more thing, and I'll be quiet. At the moment, there's a spectacular Gifford exhibition at the Thomas Cole House, Cedar Grove in Catskill. It's on through the 29th of this month, and it's just fantastic. It's hung in the new recreated Thomas Cole studio, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
It's only through the end of the month.
Okay. Before we move on, may I just make a footnote, which is probably another reason why we should call this Gifford Park. I always bring this up when
Gifford Square.
Gifford Square, when Peter mentions it, but the railroad goes through the park because Elihu Gifford wanted it to go to his foundry. So there's another reason for calling it.
Good old boy politics.
Okay, folks, David Boreas.
Yeah, I just have a question to throw out. We're not discussing other parts of the city. We're only discussing the downtown part, really. What about Oakdale and Charles Williams and those other parts that are off the periphery around, which serve another segment of the city?
We'll have to take that into consideration. No,
I'm just throwing it out. I'm just saying it
no,
seems like
we've
we're being
heard-
very limited.
We've heard of some interest to know about those parks.
Everybody has their favorites.
I wanted to say one thing about 7th Street Park and the fact that it was called the Public Square. It is now, at the moment, used, it's like Hyde Park. It's our Hyde Park, as well as our, what was the park you?
Well, I was just mentioning
Bryant
Bryant Park,
Park.
you know,
Bryant
just
Park.
a place to sit, eat lunch.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
have
But
lunch.
all the rallies are held there. It's always the gathering spot when your parade has to step off from 7th Street. That's where we start. So anyway, I've missed, okay, next.
I'm Ian Mitchie from Claverick, but I come to Hudson quite a lot.
Well,
I just wanted to recommend a fantastic book. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's by Lyndon B. Miller. She was an artist, and she got involved with the Central Park Conservatory. Started with a small park in the north, in a decrepit area, a decrepit park that had fallen into disuse, and she brought it back to life. She brought the whole neighborhood back to life. She went on to be very important in the whole restoration of Central Park, and she's written about it here in this book.
What's the title?
The book is called Parks, Plants, and People. She also was the force behind the planting of daffodils after 9/11 as a commemorative of the people that died in 9/11. And millions upon millions of daffodils have been planted in New York City because of her initiative, and has inspired me in my own little way to plant so far about 30,000 daffodils in Claverick.
Yay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Canal.
I'm sorry for speaking so much, but I want you all to realize one thing. If you're going to do major investment, major plannings, you also should plan on having security cameras. Hudson did plantings before in 7th Street Park, tulips, daffodils, etc. And when they bloomed, the young vagabonds of Hudson decided that it's time to chop off their heads, okay? So any type of investment on plantings of that nature, other than on shrubbery, trees, etc., you're going to need security, because unfortunately there's people that still live in Hudson that love to go to parks and will destroy anything that they think is beautiful, okay? Why? I don't have an answer, but that's reality.
Yes, Cynthia.
I'm Cynthia Lambert, and I live on Green Street. And I used to work in Central Park for Parks Department. And what Tom just said is right, and I lived in the West Village, and Washington Square was unusable. It was all drug dealers. You couldn't walk your dog there, you couldn't bring your kids there. They put cameras in, and the ACLU went crazy, but within a couple weeks, the park was usable again. People brought their kids there again. People were playing chess there again. No more. The drug dealers scarpered, and that's when the beginning of Washington Square being a nice park again started to happen. So that's something we should think about.
Kitty.
Just a liaison between the tree committee, the tree group, and us would be helpful, because if they're already doing an inventory, you know, we could share that information and not have to invent the wheel again, you know.
I'd be happy to be that liaison.
Okay, we have a liaison then. Yes, Laura.
Mara, I live on Washington Street. I know it's a tough subject and not definitely a top priority, but let's think about dog park in all of this. And maybe Hudson will finally get some little corner for a dog park.
Great. Okay. Yes. Oh, do you want to talk about a dog park?
Oh, well, I've wanted to talk about a dog park ever since I moved here. I just want to go back to Sarah's initial remarks when you talked about the whiskey barrels. Were the whiskey barrels meant to be lining Warren Street? What were they? What was the idea behind them?
The idea was that to have flowers up and down. You know, some towns have the hanging flower baskets, but then somebody has to go around and water them all.
Right.
And it was like we donate them to the shopkeepers, and people actually volunteered to take a whiskey barrel, so that when you walked up, there was some kind of unifying vision to town.
So what you were doing is coordinating with each shopkeeper you would give them the barrels and then they would take care of them?
Yeah. So it was off our backs.
So would this be part of Parks Conservancy as well? Or is that a different?
That was one project.
That was
No, I
just a
can't.
project, yeah.
Other cities have
Now
done that.
there's so many people that have wonderful planners. Vince Mulford was here.
Right.
You know, everybody's got really beautiful planners now.
But some people do, not everybody. It would be nice.
Yes.
Excuse me for interjecting into your meeting. I'm a visitor to Hudson, and I work in a school, and so that is my perspective right now in response to what you were observing about potential vandalism by the youth. And you know, it might be beyond your remit, but perhaps there's a possibility to find a way to liaise with local schools to integrate gardening or whether vegetables or flowers with the local curriculum, or to involve children from the local schools in the development of the parks and the projects that you're discussing, so that the children and youth of Hudson can find ownership in the parks and develop a respect and responsibility for them.
Good idea. There is somebody.
Yeah.
There's somebody in the junior high
I'm a
school.
visitor, so-
Diana Howard, sorry.
And
Has a
Operation
wonderful
Unite
program.
does
Has a wonderful. She has
plantings.
gardens outside the junior high school, and she teaches the kids in her biology class all about vegetable gardening, and she would be a perfect person to contact.
What was her
ongoing
name?
program.
Diana Howard.
Diana Howard.
Was she Diane Doty before?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, Vince.
I missed most of the meeting.
So just curious, is there an idea of like each ward has its own subdivision of this, and
It
then?
hasn't come up, but thank you for raising it.
It's more like people could pick their favorite park to.
Well, because we can't all take care of the whole town, but if you have pride in the first ward, pride in the fourth ward, to take care of your little aspects, then we can all get together for the big aspects.
Mr. Newman.
I'm of the strong opinion that Hudson is the county seat of the entire county of Columbia. And everyone in this county uses the city of Hudson. And I do strongly feel that Columbia County residents should be tapped to help maintain and enhance these. I do, the city I grew up in has a planter program with a very, very hefty endowment from several individuals, and they're replanted sometimes like every 2 weeks, and they're gorgeous, and they're the pride of the town. But the Central Park Conservancy works because it has Fifth Avenue and Central Park West. Well, the city of Hudson also has all of Columbia County, and I think it's something that this conservancy is not just the people who live and walk directly to the park, that it really enhances our entire county and our county seat, and it's a way to look at it financially too.
Yes, Dorothy, hi.
I'm sorry I was late, so I didn't hear the beginning of the meeting. Was there any discussion about how this organization would be funded in terms of charitable contributions being tax deductible?
We did talk about forming a 501c3.
So that's on the plan?
That is part, well, we have 4 groups that, sort of subgroups that we're trying to organize. The first being the formation team, which would put together the 501c3 application and think about the structure. Another assignment for that group has been eliminated because we have determined that we can use the term, we can use the name Hudson Parks Conservancy, even though we don't have that kind of relationship with the city of Hudson yet. So that, the idea of, the structure, where the money comes from, the issue of whether this is a membership group where we all, pay money to belong, or, that's, all of those questions I'm hoping will be answered, or answers will be recommended to the full group by that smaller group. And if you would like to be on it, please let us know.
I just had an idea. Brooklyn Botanical Garden always had a really wonderful plant sale every year, and they were kind of unusual plants, things that you might not, but there's so many cool nurseries around. Maybe as a fundraiser, that could be something that's part of our arsenal too, to, I don't know, help play for the planters. We could have a plant sale that was partially.
Yeah, we could sort of just revive what used to be the Hudson Bush Farm plant sale, which was just, and people would, like when they were separating their, iris beds or something.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Bring the leftovers.
The things that are like, naturalized here.
Yeah, Cornell Extension does it.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That'd be good.
they had to cancel their plans because of the jumping worms this year.
Yeah. Dorothy.
And I just want to add to my question about the money, because I think the comment that was made about the Bryant Park is completely on target, because a few years ago, Lori Olin, who's a very famous landscape architect, spoke at a symposium of the Oklahoma Partnership, and he talked about how he redesigned that park. It came, went from being a place that was dark with drug dealers and all that, and he figured out, how to make it work for the people. And Lori Olin, by the way, was honored Tuesday night by the Oklahoma Partnership. He got a big award from them. But I guess my point is, and I guess a side note is, this person who came up with the idea that you thought was so dreadful is a protege of his. So maybe, you have to be sensitive to, people people's thoughts on what works for Hudson when they're outsiders. But anyway, my point is that redoing a park so that it works is an extremely expensive proposition. And it's not just, you know, putting flowers in or, you know, making shrubs or whatever. I mean, it involves a very excellent landscape architect, and so it seems like you need a lot of money to do something like that.
We'll build up to that.
Yes, sir.
To expand on one of the first comments about having just an inventory of the parks, what all we're talking about. We have the Facebook page. I think a very simple project would be to come up with like a bio for each park, just a brief sentence describing what history is known of it, the location, a picture, pictures of it, and just put it on the Facebook page so people can start seeing it. It's free and it's an easy way to start visualizing projects.
And when you start talking about signage for the park, thank you. That if there's signage that's cohesive for all of it, it'll make us seem more like a group. You know what I mean? All the parks have a similar with the bio and
Yes,
where it's
you have
from.
Angela and Chandler.
Yeah.
A map shows where the parks are. Okay, folks.
I was also late to the meeting, and I just wondered if there was a discussion about annexation of any part of the correctional facility, the grounds of that.
No, there wasn't. And Carol's leaving the room just when we need her. So, but it's, oh, you know about it.
I could speak to that, Historic Hudson. And everyone should know there is, New York State has a major movement that seems to be rolling forwards of working on a trail linking the city of Hudson with Olana. And there are pieces being put together of the puzzle, and there are conversations with New York State about a public access park. And it's about 3.5 miles from Hudson to Olana, and it in itself needs to be thought through. And there are conversations happening in Albany about how that might be. So things are burbling that parkway. But whatever happens, you know, the Amtrak station, the third busiest in the nation, becomes a gateway to get without a car to Olana and then to Cedar Grove, as there are also trail links being proposed. So, you know, the city of Hudson and this conservancy are all part of something greater that is happening to look to enhance our communities, and as Peter says, to make it a really great place to live, not just a nice place to live.
The North Bay is supposed to connect to the whole trail system.
Yeah.
Heading north.
Yeah.
And the county has a grant right now to designing that trail. Great. So,
All right.
there's potential in all directions for connections.
Going over your head for a second. Sure. Yes.
My name is Dale Schaefer. I'm a landscape architect that runs an office in Warren Street, Wagner Hudson, and also live on East Allen Street. And so I walk all over the city, and I have lots of favorite parks. And a lot of the conversation has to do with big ideas and what can we do in the small scale. What we really need is a master plan, but it seems like as a kind of an initial kind of thought, because I'm really connected to the trees in the town, working with the CAC and developing the sort of the street tree permitting process, etc. So one of the things that we might consider as a way to, as a kind of a bone to give to the city, as well as help the city in their maintenance program, is think about ways of funding some of the trees in the parks. Because I live really close to Courthouse Square, which I think could be much more beautiful if the trees were just beautifully trimmed and limbed up and became a wonderful canopy. And we have so many wonderful trees in town, in the parks, unfortunately not on the streets so much, but that that could be just by the use of trimming trees and cleaning them up. Just like in Bryant Park, the trees are so majestic there because they were treated in a way that brought them into a canopy. But so maybe things like that which take some onus off of the city, but also in a lot of bang for your buck, where you can do something to a park that will make it immediately look and feel different.
Thank you. Vicki, you had your hand up before.
Yes. These ideas are all wonderful, but where is the money going to come from, and how are we going to raise enough money to make a big difference?
We're going to have a fundraising.
We're going to be on the fundraising.
You start with a small project.
There you go.
Yeah,
Start very small and say, let's grow.
I have to become instantly successful.
Yeah, start here.
With something small.
It's wonderful to be in a room with people who are all enthusiastic about something and not complaining.
Yes. Could you tell me if the Washington Park, which is commonly called as 4th Street Park in front of the courthouse, is city or county property?
County.
County property.
County maintains that.
Okay.
And I'm actually on the Public Works Committee with the county.
Okay.
So I love your idea, you know, you might be able to start something small there. One thing that I would love to do is move the tombstones away from the front of what I call the tombstones. They're all veterans memorials. Right along in front of the stairs there. And we could, say, move them to the other side of the park and make a memorial garden, but talk about treading on top. This is the most difficult. I'm scared to death to even start this conversation. Turn off the camera. Because right now, they're not honored, the veterans aren't honored properly where they are because everything is competing for viewshed and everything. And the memorial, there are other places that have memorial gardens. But this is a project for the future because that's, you have to get the plan in place and have everybody sign on to it. And there's quite a few different organizations there right now. And then there's a couple up at in Gifford Square.
Yep.
There's, I forget which memorial's up there, but kind of.
Thank you for saying Gifford Square.
That's another consideration is
Public conversation.
I understand there's somebody who wants to say something out in the hallway.
I'm Michael LaSawyer.
Oh, come inside, please.
I spoke with Carol last week or the week before. We were just having a little private conversation and talking about the Parks Committee, et cetera, and she said that, oh, it would be good if we could get something that we could do right away, that it wouldn't be a big deal. And I've been thinking about that, and the one thing that we could do right away, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money, and the city would let us do it, is the small little building at the foot of Academy Hill, between Academy Hill Playground and the hospital. There's that little stone building right there. It's got unpainted 2x4s and an X closing the doors.
That's the
It needs
Fred
a
W.
gallon.
Jones Firehouse, did you know that?
It needs 2 gallons of paint and the removal of those things.
Well, actually, the doors are beautiful the way they are. It just needs the 2x4s.
The 2x4s removed and some paint.
No, the doors are beautiful.
So, that's something that we could do right away, and we wouldn't need to. We could make a statement and people would drive by and say, hey, that Parks Conservancy is actually doing something. Because if we, I like Peter's idea for changing the name of 7th Street Park, but if we come out of here tonight and they read in the newspaper today, oh, we had a big Park Conservancy meeting, oh, what did they do? Oh, they changed the name of 7th Street Park. You know, we're an enlightened group in here, but the rest of the city out there isn't, you know, and oh, they changed the name of the park. And another thing about parks, and somebody said something about signage, and I like that idea because I go up here a lot and there's nobody that knows that there's a beautiful vista up there. But with signage, if you look at 7th Street Park now, there's already too many signs.
Thank you.
Well,
I can't see the park because I can't smoke here and I can't skateboard over there. And that entrance, I can't ride a bicycle. And this one here, I gotta watch for the dogs.
A design opportunity.
So, that's gotta go. But my other idea that Carol liked, and then I'll shut up, is Rogers Park. Is that the name of it, Carol?
Rogers Park, yeah.
Rogers Park.
Judy already mentioned Rogers Park, yeah.
And somebody else like that. We could toss everything out of there, the little building in there and the Olympic thing, just chuck it. You know, just chuck it, and DPW could remove all of that stuff in a half an hour. We chuck it, and we pick up the phone, and we call Art Omai and say, hey, this is Vincent from the Park Conservancy in Hudson. Do you have something to loan us for 6 months? And I'm sure Art Omai would be happy to give us a 20-foot tall sculpture.
That's a great idea.
And put it on public display right there, and then we can stick a little sign along the fence there that says Art Omai, and throw away the Kiwanis sign. It reminds me of the fork in the road down on 199 outside of Red Hook, if anybody's ever seen the giant fork.
That we're on fire once every 4 years.
Yeah, whoever. But I'm sure there's a lot of artists that would be happy to display in Hudson. That's what we're all about.
It could be a public art space that
We
was
may be able to
consistent.
get to the point where we
Changing
could charge
venues.
gallery space to the artist for putting this thing in Rogers Park.
Or the pocket parks.
But those two ideas right there, painting the little thing up at Academy Dome and cleaning up Rogers Park and putting something in there, there wouldn't be any objections from anyone. I'm sure Art Omai would cooperate with us.
Kiwanis would kill you.
There is no Kiwanis.
There is no
Kiwanis.
Kiwanis
Kiwanis
There are no Kiwanis.
There is no Kiwanis,
Are
and
there really?
Amanda,
Let's go and tear it down tonight.
Amanda was the moving force behind both that memorial and the fountain died last year.
Oh,
And what was his
who
name?
was that?
Tom Thomas.
Okay.
Phone correctly, 225 Union Street again. Carol, the 2x4s on the shed, they were put there because there was a vacant living in there.
Yep.
Is that right? You know the Statue of Liberty statue, is that on private property, is that in Hudson?
That's private property.
That's
Yeah.
private
Okay.
property, and yes, it's in Hudson.
Okay.
It is kind of, you don't like it?
I like it.
It's kind of cool like
It goes with the former Liberty Paint Store.
Before we go, don't say.
Very short term, in order to release the fountain from its prison, my brother, who owns Lotus Solar or Lotus Energy on Green Street, has offered to run that fountain, the present fountain, with solar panels so that it can be released from its prison, the bars can come down, and it could just be a fountain that you could actually look at and be around. Because the reason there's prison bars around it is liability issues because of the electricity it takes to run that fountain. But if it doesn't use power lines, then you don't have to do that. You can do it with solar, and we'd have an actual fountain that people could enjoy. So that's a short-term and free project.
One more thing over here, and then I'm going to give everybody at the table a chance to talk. They have
I can tell folks about a secret park that not everyone might know. Tom, you probably know about this. On the flanks of the cemetery, you know the very strange intersection up at the hospital, that crazy intersection where you're never quite sure who has the right of way? If you were to go into the cemetery from that point, on the flanks of the cemetery, there used to be a little children's park. I think there were 5 of them in Hudson at one point in time. And it's got a very, very large circular pool, probably 150 feet across. It at one time had a swing set, it had a merry-go-round. It's a lovely little plateau of land that is immediately adjacent to the old part of the cemetery high up in the northwest corner. I have permission from the city to do a little bit of maintenance in there. I've gone in with a chainsaw and taken out some of the fallen timber and so forth. But if you ever get a chance to take a hike up into that corner of the cemetery, you'll find this wonderful little park. And it actually has potential to be something quite nice. It's a nice spot for a picnic or whatever, and it's kind of off the radar.
May I add to what you're commenting about? Okay. That was called Academy Hill Park, was part of the City of Hudson's park systems for the youth of Hudson during the summer months, and I think there were 7 of those parks located in Hudson, okay?
When was it last used, Tom?
I would say mid to late 60s. There was, at one time, believe it or not, there was a wonderful, magnificent youth program in the City of Hudson, okay? But the twin to that park was Franklin Park, which was destroyed by urban renewal, which was the last plot of land before you went across Fleet Street Bridge, and it had the mirror cement pond, as people referred to it, down there. So there is a cement structure up there, so there's probably water pipes available if you wanted to put a fountain, a pool, or whatever. And there's also water lines to the St. Winifred statue too, because that used to be water there, so there is water access to that.
Great. Thank you all so much for coming. This has been really great. And I just want to ask if Joe and Mara or David have anything they would like to contribute to the discussion.
I would like this, the Venus statue to be restored. How many people in the audience would love for that to happen? I know it's money.
Did anyone give an estimate on?
Well, we were waiting for the people who said they were going to restore it to give us an estimate, but they never did, so we don't know. But we were going to, just Wendell Davis and I were going to take this on as our mission, just to get that to happen, but we didn't get any cooperation with the people, from the people who, well, they were busy doing something else. And we can go back to them. Cynthia?
I remember that, hearing some outrageous amount for an estimate for that. I mean, maybe it wasn't factual, but if it's gonna be $50,000 or $70,000, it's less expensive to just recreate the actual statue.
Okay.
And have something that looks just like it there.
Well, it is actually, it was, at the time that it was purchased, it was cast from a mold. There are at least 5 others around in the state of New York, and I actually did a post on the Gossips of Rivertown about it, and indicated other places where you could see the the very same statue.
What material is it? What's it made out of? Is it cast cement?
No.
Cast iron?
No, it's some cast metal. I think it's zinc.
David, did you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
No, the only thing I was doing was getting the people in the 5th Ward and what they think of the parts in their neighborhood, because I don't see Tom.
Well, there was someone actually from the 5th Ward who posted on the Facebook page, Justin Goldman, I think, who said, I really, I want to see some attention to Oakdale because it's a beautiful park. It's,
Actually, Oakdale's getting, Nick is doing a great job.
But it's the park, I mean, not the, the youth
Right,
center.
right, but the park, even,
yeah.
The mattresses and all this garbage, that's part of it, that's been improved.
There was in the DRA, as I remember. Was that
Oakdale?
No, maybe not. No.
It's in the LWRP, I mean, it's part of the...
We could hold board meetings on the subject of the parks if we wanted. But anyway, is everyone here signed up or put their name on the
Add to your sign-up name.
And
if you wanted to come to another meeting, is Friday night a good time, or seems to get the weekenders, or this time of day?
Yeah. Talk about the park that's down on Mill Street that's rarely used.
Not really.
Sorry,
Susan Charles Williams.
Oh, that's Charles Williams.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned it, and it's a park that I would like us to give some attention to, because it was badly, it was a much more elaborate park when it was designed, but it was, when it was realized, it became, nothing but this little pavilion kind of thing and a little plastic, sort of jungle gym thing. And that's where everybody talks about putting the dog park. There was supposed to be a dog park as, you know, as part of the original plan. Actually, a dog run, hardly a dog park. But now that, you know, we should advocate for a genuine 1-acre dog park, and probably a bigger one so we could have a place for little dogs and a place for big dogs.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah.
But the main thing is access. If there was created a decent connection between Third
But
Street
that was
down
part
there,
of the plan.
you'd double the use of.
That was part of the original plan, to have this trail that with many, many switchbacks went down that steep cliff.
Maybe that's something we could do, work on also.
Well, you know, the original plans for that park, or, you know, the drawings, are, I think they're still on the city website, but I have them digitally and I'll put them on our Facebook page so everybody can see, you know, what it was supposed to be and what we got, which was, you know, considerably less than, because there, you know, there was supposed to be a picnic area, a big picnic area, and a dog park, and a basketball court, and a, you know, what's it called, skateboard park. I don't know that, you know, skateboard parks are really popular anymore, but, you know, there were just lots of things that were supposed to be there. Yeah, I know.
Well, lots of action ideas have arisen, so we'll have a lot to talk about and to organize, so I hope you'll all keep coming to meetings, and we have captured your names, I hope, so you can't get away from us.
Yeah, send in your ideas and we'll try, I think we need to start an email address too.
Yeah.
But we haven't figured out what that would be.
Well, you know,
We have the
I think
Facebook page.
the Facebook page is
Yeah.
a wonderful way to share ideas because everyone can go to it. And you know, I think that's kind of useful. So, we haven't come to consensus about what our first project should be, but with any luck, we'll leave here with our 5 or 4 subcommittees in place, and
I think getting a 501c3 is probably the first project.
yeah,
Formalize something.
but it's not gonna show to the world, nobody's gonna know that we
And
have it.
I mean, somebody, an attorney can verify this, but in order to have a 501c3, you have to have a board of directors and officers.
We need 3 people.
Yeah.
3 people to sign on, and I think Ellen and Sarah and I agreed to be those 3 people, and then, you know, we can kind of pass that responsibility on to others.
Open to help.
Anything else that absolutely has to be said? Vince?
Does this have anything to do with making some nice signs that say welcome to Hudson? All these little fiddly towns all around Hudson have these nice little, I'm sorry, they're all the same, but anyway, they're green with gold card and letters that say, you know, established. And we've got these tin rusted things from the 60s.
Do we even have
Oh.
signs that say welcome?
There's one down
The
the
friendly city.
It's in the South Bay.
I thought they just said, you know, things like,
It's right above the parking
I
restrictions.
think it has a whale on it.
parking.
Guns that not allowed.
Could still read the friendly city.
How about, I don't know if anyone brought this up, but the little house that should just, the house between, right by the dump, if you're coming
The
up.
wedge up there.
Yeah, the
Actually,
wedge.
Mike-
What is the deal with that
Michael
house?
Malinsky bought that in foreclosure,
Yes.
and then I heard he discovered it was full of asbestos, so he hasn't been able to do anything with it.
What house
I
are
was
you talking
thinking
about?
of a park,
And the
I mean,
wedge
that
would come into
was
town.
really.
Greenport Fire and the cemetery and,
Yeah, when you're coming
Oh.
It's on the-
3B.
I'll ask him, what's the status?
I think
There
he's
was
run out
there
of
was a
steam.
plan to turn that into a park once.
I mean, you talk about an entrance to the city and signage, it's like such a, turn the camera on.
There is a group, a sort of ad hoc working group that's been talking about gateways to the city. And I don't know to what extent they formalize themselves, but they are interested in exactly that. And the important entrances to our community, that some of them are pretty awful, to be polite. And you know, addressing those situations and working with the new government in January to address them and start making some progress on those visual, what's a good word? Eyesores, thank you.
Who is on that committee?
That's not a formal committee, it's just some folks talking.
Unnamed folks?
Unnamed folks.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
It's not part of this committee.
We'll talk to you later.
But I think they're on the right track, and I'm very supportive, and I would think there'd be some convergence between this group and that group.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to Danielle.